Hello and welcome to Building Tomorrow's Insurer, where we explore the cutting edge of insurtech and digital innovation in the insurance industry. I'm your host, Nigel Fellowes-Freeman, the founder and CEO of Kanopi, and today I could not be more excited to be joined by the exceptional Natasha Gale. I'm going to give you a little short history and you will understand why I just said exceptional. She has a career spanning 25 years, but really across the whole spectrum of the financial service industry, banking, premium funding, and insurance. So brings an enormous wealth of experience and people focus, especially now in her role as CEO of ARAG Services Australia, or ARAG, whichever you want to. I will dive into this, Natasha, and I'll learn from you which is the right way and how I should pronounce it. Natasha's had a number of roles across big corporates, Westpac, Allianz, Wesfarmers, you name it. She's been kind of part of it and really now starting to shape some really interesting insurance offerings in Australia, especially around legal expense. And so no doubt we will get deep into that as we roll through. So Natasha, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Nigel. Thanks for having us. I just mentioned to you before, this is my first podcast, so I'm very excited that we're now moving into this very digital space, that we're able to have better conversations, and hopefully people that join or listen to this will it's not just reading something on paper anymore. We're actually sort of having real conversations and entering into that space. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. It almost was like an Olympic type. We're getting the Olympic feel going, so I'm really excited. So thank you. Look, I've been very fortunate. I've had a wonderful career. Gosh, you gave me 25 years, so now my age is out there. But very lucky, and have been very fortunate to work not only with some exceptional organisations, but with some exceptional people. And I think that's definitely shaped the leader I am today and the work that I do today. But also, we go through our career and we do things and see things, and hopefully we learn from the things that are good, and we take those with us, and then we leave the other things that aren't so good. So I hope that I've been able to do that in my 25-year plus career. So so thank you for that very exciting introduction, and looking forward to the conversation we're about to have.
Yeah, likewise. And touching on that, you mentioned there your career and the people that you've worked with being very influential. I think sometimes starting at the beginning really frames up a conversation really well. And so you obviously spent a bunch of time within the financial service industry. Can you take us back to the beginning? Take us back to when you entered the financial service industry. What was the driver there? What was the driver that got you to enter the financial service industry, and then how you found your way through to the insurance sector specifically?
Yeah, okay. Good question. So I was a Year 12 graduate. That was when we did HSCs, and it wasn't such a big thing. And you had a choice whether you went to university or not. And I did get accepted into university. And ironically, I wanted to study law and become a police officer. And my mother, who was very conservative, decided that that was not a great career for a young woman. And my father and her decided that joining the bank was a much more safer and much more sensible option for me. And I suppose I joined the bank. I did what I was supposed to do. And Westpac Bank at the time had a graduate program that they used to offer. So a bit like the graduate programs they offer now, but it's usually in conjunction with a university degree. This was probably a management graduation program where you actually saw all facets of the bank. So I was fortunate enough to be selected into their management graduate program, and I did everything. So you were a teller, you were a bank clerk, you worked in the days where, someone bought a house and you'd actually physically go and exchange documents with the other purchaser. So I had a really wonderful, platform grounding, and I still today think that that was the best university degree that I ever had. So that's where I started and found my way through the different areas of the bank, and Westpac being one of the major forwards at the time and still are. There were so many opportunities to grow and to go in and find what you were great at. And I found myself in those days as a bank manager, and in those days it was quite prestigious to be a bank manager, and I was quite young, and in a little country town. So I learnt lots, and then was very fortunate as my career sort of grew, and I got more involved in the lending and the business banking and the nuances of the financial services. Westpac actually picked up the 2000 Olympic sponsorship. And I thought that would be a really cool place to go and hang out for a couple of years. So, I was lucky enough, and I became Olympics marketing manager for a retail bank in New South Wales. And, just had an amazing journey through there, and met some fabulous people, got to athlete manage, and again, all of these things that you think boring bankers, it wasn't boring bankers. It was a fantastic platform. And from there, I suppose I didn't fall into insurance. I was headhunted to come across and work in Allianz in their premium funding area. So that's sort of where I started. But I think what that gave me was not only the technical skills or the practical skills, but it also gave me that introduction into corporate life and, probably some of the things that I think a lot of our younger people miss today, the water cooler conversations, the how do you show up to a meeting. Yes, there was some hierarchy. I learned, was very, in those days it was very male dominated. So often I was the only female at a table. So you learn a lot. And as I said in the introduction, you take the good with you and you learn and you develop that, and then you leave the bad and the ugly behind.
I think sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you, but I just want to take up on that because I think it's so important, which is all of these moments that maybe when you're working through your career, you don't appreciate maybe all of the importance of learning all of those different parts of how a business operates, and whether it's a teller or whether it's looking after athletes, or you've mentioned there a broad spectrum of kind of skills and social interactions and corporate interactions you need to learn to be able to, I guess, be a great leader. Right? All of these kind of pieces, and hopefully, I imagine that maybe led to this decision for you to maybe continue and pivot back into the insurance world and lead ARAG. Am I right there?
No, you're right. And, that's
ARAG.
Right.
Perfect. Got it right. We got there. So can you talk me about that and about that jump into ARAG and really what the purpose is behind that?
Yeah, no. So ARAG, as you correctly. So as you said, I kind of got to a place, and I think one of my core values is justice, sense of justice and social justice. And I don't think I really quite understood what that was until I came across this role. I knew that there was always, this fairness that needed to be in our society, and insurance is very much around, providing that protection when you need it, but it's usually only afforded to those that can afford it. And so when I came across ARAG, or ARAG came across me, I'm not too sure which one, but either way, we found each other, and I was really, to be really honest, I was a bit done with insurance and the corporate world. I'd sort of had a little bit of a navel staring moments, and my last child was finishing high school, and so I think you get to a point where I think I'm going to talk as a woman. I think most women get to when they've raised a family, they've had a career, they've juggled. They kind of do some navel staring and sort of what do I do next? Thankfully, ARAG and I found each other, and I was really impressed by what ARAG stood for. Their whole platform is access to justice and ensuring that every individual has the right to pursue or defend their legal right. And so that resonated immensely with me, and I thought, well, if I'm going to go and do this, if I'm going to take all of my corporate experience and all the the skills and what I've learned and do good, not evil, then this is the place I want to do it. You know, this is something new in the Australian market. I mean, we know that 1 in 3 Europeans have legal expense insurance. I mean, you're from the UK, you know that it's kind of embedded in a lot of products that are there. You know, in the US, it's 98% of their business is legal expense insurance through employee benefits and from a association level. So bringing that product to Australia was really exciting for me, and it was something that I felt that if I was passionate and really believed in, then it wasn't work that I was going to do. So
That is wonderful.
Yeah, I had a conversation.
That's wonderfully inspiring.
Oh, thank you. But, you know, and the whole process of coming on was really interesting as well, because it was COVID. And so I couldn't fly to Germany to meet anyone. Everything was online. So I was doing interviews at midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning because, you know, I'm going for a job. So I wasn't going to tell the Germans that they had to get up at, you know, 6 o'clock for me, because that's a much better time. Yeah. So I had some funny moments where I was wandering around in my dressing gown and then stripping off and, you know, had a suit and a full face of makeup. And my husband would go, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I got an interview. It's 2 o'clock in the morning." Yeah, I know. So all of that process was really interesting. And again, I'm learning all about a new product, a new country, a new culture. And yeah, here we are.
Legal, as we just mentioned, legal expense insurance is got quite a high penetration outside of Australia. But in Australia, as you just called out, it's a relatively new concept. And so can you just maybe give an overview of what it is, and then maybe specifically explain what the BAM effect is and why it's so impactful in helping Australians kind of understand and embrace LEI?
Yeah. So essentially, and I'll give you the sales pitch, LEI, legal expense insurance, is a before the event cover, and that means it's a claims-made product. So you can't have already known about the event if you took before you take the policy out, and therefore it's only if the event that happens after you've purchased the policy. It's a pursuit and defence cover, which, unlike most other insurances, it's more for a defence. So you crash your car, you get covered. If you're intoxicated, you don't get covered. So there's always that it's a defence and adverse kind of policy reaction. Legal expense insurance has a pursuit. So even if you are wrong, or even if you have done something that has probably had an adverse effect on the outcome or the decision that you're pursuing, you still have the right to pursue your legal right. And that's what I love about it. It provides choice. So that's essentially the cover. As I said, it's claims made. It's a very simple, and it's based on a criteria of events. So like any insurance policy, the policy has to respond to the actual event. So it's not like you can take a policy out and then just go around suing everybody. That's definitely not what we're doing. But given that Australia is the second most litigious country in the world by capita, you know, it's really interesting that Australians are sort of still struggling with the concept of it. So that's it in a nutshell. The BAM effect is, and I love this, it's, you know, you have conversations, Nigel, you do what you do, and you go to the family barbecue or you go to a friend's dinner party and they say, "Oh, so Nigel, what do you do?" And you tell them what you do and they go, "Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, that's good." I talk about legal expense insurance and everyone sits there and looks at me and says, "Oh my God, I wish I had this like 2 years ago when blah, blah, blah happened." Or, "Oh my goodness, my sister could have done this because she got dismissed from her work and, you know, she worked for this guy and she never got her superannuation payments. Like, this would have been amazing for her. How come we don't know about this?" So that's what I love. People just go, "Oh my goodness, how do we not know about this?" And it's simple, you know, it's about education, and it's really just trying to make sure that, you know, people understand that they do have legal rights and they do have access to the legal environment, but they usually make those decisions because of the high cost or because it just becomes too encompassing for them to actually grasp how they're going to move forward in this. So usually it's a traumatic event anyway. So when they hear the BAM, they go, "So I could have been covered for this." Okay.
Good.
So that's sort of what we talk about when we say, there's that kind of light bulb. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Light bulb moment. You mentioned there under insurance and under protection. Something that here at Kanopi it's a real fundamental pillar of our belief that the protection gap is growing, being the protection that people financially and socially should have but do have in terms of insurance protection, and most of the data suggests that from 2010 to 2020, that number doubled in size versus halving, and that appears to us in terms of maybe two things, which is kind of education not being there, access not being there, and maybe financially being hard to take out that level of cover. Sits straight in that sweet spot, really, of this real under protection, this real kind of protection gap with this need. And so, can you talk maybe to why you think that exists here in Australia specifically, and what it will take from insurers, from regulatory bodies, from maybe technology platforms to help really bridge this gap and close that protection gap?
Gosh, I could bang on about this all day. But I won't. So if we go back to what the fundamentals of insurance is, insurance is a safety net to provide individuals and businesses with protection and peace of mind. That's why we take out insurance. People take it out to, they've got a mortgage on their house. The house burns down. They don't want to be left with that debt. So they take it out. It's logic, right? You wouldn't drive around without an uninsured car. Most Australians today would not have insurance, health insurance, right? Just the cost of medical, you just wouldn't do it. So it is quite the conundrum when we've got a product like legal expense insurance, when most events, if there is a dispute, end up in a legal dispute, and we don't want to take the cover out for it. So we've done some, Australia is quite a new market for ARAG. And so I suppose for us, at the moment, the data is quite anecdotal, but, we see that culturally we're a she'll be right kind of mate. She'll be right, won't happen to me. No one's going to come after me. It's almost like a laissez-faire kind of approach until until it happens, and then they think, what should I do? I think there's that, and that relates to sort of our LEI policy and really trying to get businesses. You look at a small business who often struggles to make ends meet day to day, and increasingly so at the moment with the economic climate that they're in and the rising cost of insurance. And insurance is always, as long as I've been in it, has always been a grudge purchase. If something has to give, it's going to be, can we cut back on my insurance? And, we saw in the 2019 bushfires, and the subsequent floods that we've seen up the North Coast, the underinsurance that came through there. So look, I don't think there's a simple answer to it. I think culturally we tend to be a little bit, laissez-faire. I've used that word before, but it's that she'll be right and it won't happen to me until it does. And I think we've got more vehicles where people can purchase cheaper policies and cheaper insurance without really understanding whether they're getting cover for it or not. And I think for me, that's something that we work very hard with our broker partners and with our other distribution partners is to really try and understand where their gaps are in traditional, and I call it traditional insurance, and how can we help support that, and how can we help fill those gaps. So even if you're an individual, if you're a mum and dad, you might have a neighbourly dispute. You might have you purchase a washing machine online and it gets delivered and it's the wrong washing machine. Who do you go to if you can't get in touch with the washing machine supplier to get the washing machine that you go to Consumer Affairs, you go to Fair Trading. They're a government body that is overworked, understaffed. You just become a number. However, if you had a insurance policy that you're able to ring up a lawyer and talk to somebody and get some advice on which way you could go and how do you mitigate the issue, that's such a better outcome than having to go through or just going, oh, well, I'll just accept. So, look, I don't think there's a simple answer. I think there are lots of things that we need to do as an industry, and I think there's a lot of things that we can be doing differently in different spaces. So it's not just the business or the individuals. I think we've got some work to be done in where we've got disadvantaged groups in insurance who don't get access to general insurance. Just, they drive around in uninsured cars because they can't afford it. Or, in some cases, we have a demographic, I'm very passionate about this space we're in at the moment, which is domestic violence and survivors of domestic violence, where insurance is actually another way that the perpetrator can control them through financial coerciveness. And, so that we've got some work to do in that space. So I don't think it's a simple answer, but I think we just have to keep having those conversations. And I think the industry and generally we need to be having these more robust conversations around the importance of insurance.
I think it sounds the summary of that being education and financial obviously being a component of that in terms of price and cost, and that's something that you're right is very much a topic around the table. When I speak to other founders and other executives and small businesses, the cost pressure is really real, and making payroll is hard sometimes. And so you're right, the costs are always looked at. And so it feels a little bit to me like education super important, but then also distribution. I'm sure from your perspective around how you get the product into market and achieving the growth that you must be taking, I imagine you're taking some interesting ways in getting the product into market. Is it you going a very traditional route in terms of intermediated, like broker only? Are you taking some affinity routes, some partnership route? How are you taking the product to market and letting people know about it?
Yeah, so we have sort of three channels that we work through. So we work through our broker channel, our intermediated space, which is very traditional. I still think brokers have a very important part to play in the education and advice space, and I think, I mentioned we've had some serious catastrophes in Australia with weather events, and I think those that weren't insured through brokers really struggled with the claims and getting access to. We're still seeing half of Lismore still not rebuilt yet because of the underinsurance and the claims process up there. But and the second part is we partner through associations and affinity groups. So where employee benefits, working with associations where they deliver a more broader offering to individuals and to businesses. And then the third is, which is something quite new, I think, in Australia, is partnering with underwriting agencies or MGAs. So, and I was I think when you come in a bit new, so underwriting agencies, whilst I knew about them, I'd never really worked in them. So this was sort of my first, I was like, well, why aren't we talking to each other? Like, you've got a product, we're not in competition, but you've got a product that my product would sit really nicely with, and you've got something that would sit really nicely with my product. Why wouldn't we partner up? So I've been really lucky to work with a couple of other underwriting agencies, and we're building out some specific product offerings through that space. And we hope that will be something that, will become a bit more mainstream. As we as other underwriting agencies see the success of it, because it's not just about LEI. There are other offerings that are other emerging markets that we'll see in the future that and I think underwriting agencies have a very big and important part to play in the future of the delivery of insurance products.
Yeah,
so they're sort of our three vehicles that we're working on, and obviously technology and online platforms is still very important. I think that works when you have an established product, when you've got education, you've got some really, the level of detail and law is complicated. So often, we find there's a lot of, well, would this respond or would that respond? And you can't do that online. You can't have a bot answering legal questions, which is quite subjective. So we sort of work in those three areas, and at the moment it's a slow process, but it's working well for
That's
us.
fantastic. I think you're right. The combination of technology and advice is a very interesting one. Obviously, there's folks on one side of the equation which are brokers are going to completely digitize, and the mass market will take over a large proportion of the broker's work. And there's another point of view which is no, actually that's completely wrong. And brokers, we had somebody on the pod a few weeks ago, and actually I thought she had a really interesting point, which was to say broker underdoes really what an insurance broker's job is. And actually a risk advisor is a much better term than a broker, because it's broker puts in your mind just price, whereas a risk advisor is more focused on how can I help you protect against your risk. And I think that's a really nice positioning when thinking about that role specifically.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good use of language. I mean, we talk to our brokers around, talking about risk management profiling. So what are you doing? Why aren't you having a conversation around legal expense insurance when you're talking about, are your fleet cars insured? Are your office pack insured? Have you got property insurance? Have you got legal insurance? They're all packaged up, and that is a risk conversation that all brokers should be having. And I think they are getting better at that, Nigel. I think, but I think there is also there will always be a place for the click and flick, as I call it. You go on, you get the cheapest price and you move on until there's a claim, and I think that's when the rubber hits the road. So yeah, there's two camps, but we try and work in both, and we just think that so. Yeah, it's about education. It's about providing the tools. It's providing experiences and case studies and claims examples, so that they hopefully resonate and they can use them to help support their clients and make sure that they're insured adequately. Because it's not just about selling. I think it's beyond selling.
And protection is a nice word when it comes to that, isn't it? And you've mentioned there technology being important, but also the value of a human being involved is pretty important here around giving advice. And that's something that we hear from executives a lot, which is we've managed about 27 minutes so far without touching on Gen AI. So I'm going to go there because I'm interested in your thoughts on it, which we're hearing. Everything we hear today is that internal processes, internal tooling, great, but nowhere near yet ready to be a customer-facing application. And that speaks a little bit what you mentioned there around you can't use something like that to give advice yet. In the future, who knows? But we aren't anywhere near there yet. Have you got a view, Natasha, on Gen AI, LLMs, how kind of ARAG is using those today or wants to use them in the future at all?
Yeah. Look, I'm no IT specialist. It's probably the one thing that I've deliberately stayed out of getting insight, getting in my brain. But look, ARAG, like many companies in the insurance sector, are looking at AI and how large, LMs are providing support and how they can provide services to enhance their operations. And I know that ARAG Europe have started to dabble in the claims in the Netherlands and in Germany. We're a long way off that from here in Australia, and certainly some of the smaller MGAs that operate under ARAG. But I think there is, and in my limited understanding, I think there are some areas that it can be beneficial. Certainly customer service. You've got a quick question, you've got somebody that pops up and is able to provide that. Claims processing, does it respond? Yes, it's in. Okay, it needs a deeper look. And therefore that sort of takes that ambiguity out of that initial inquiry. I think in risk assessment, it can work. And these are sort of some of the key pillars that you look at from an operation perspective. How do we manage our business without AI at the moment? Can these respond? I mean, fraud detection, that's a big thing with insurance policies. Does AI work for that? I don't know, because, if someone can hack into, Optus or Medicare or any of those and steal my private personal data, I mean, how can they not tap into my claims AI and manipulate that? So, yeah, I think the jury's out for me, but I know that there is a lot of work being done across a lot of insurers, and certainly ARAG are doing that, and they're big enough to do that, and they have, a plethora of data that they can capture and that they can work with to be able to do that. So it's an interesting space. Without starting to sound like I'm too middle-aged, I still am a people person, and I still, even now, I love to pick up the phone. As an example, I had to return a dress. My 21-year-old daughter convinced me to buy this dress online, which I've never, ever done before in my entire life. Anyway, such a traumatic experience. Anywho, because I didn't look like the model on the picture for some reason. Anyway, so I sent the book, and I'm saying, how do I send this dress back? And she's like, it's easy. Just send a note to the bot and she'll tell you. And I'm like, I just want to talk to somebody. I just want to pick up the phone and say, where do I send this dress? What's your address? I don't want someone texting me and botting me or whatever. Anyway, so I did feel rather old, but I think in all seriousness that, there is a place for it. I just think we need to be very careful when it comes to insurance. Is a very emotional purchase, and it's when there is a claim, you need to make sure that there is also a personal response to that. And I think that would be my fear.
Yeah. I guess on the clinical piece, it's so interesting, isn't it? You mentioned there, yourself and your daughter, and it does relate a little bit to almost towards channel of choice in terms of how do you want to interact, and what are you someone that knows exactly what you're looking for, or are you someone that needs some advice on how to get there? If you need that, do you want that advice in this way or in another way? And how can we as an industry kind of lean on some of these technologies to guide people in the way they want to get the coverage they need? And maybe that leads us a little bit into, I know you mentioned there that you're not super deep in technology, but I'm sure you kind of think about it a little bit in terms of impacting the business over time. Is there anything that you're seeing or have a feeling of or are interested in terms of how technology itself will impact broadly the macro, the insurance sector over the coming years?
Look, I think it's probably going to be in that claims processing and risk assessment. That will be the two areas where I think, if the rules are all built into that framework and it doesn't become subjective then, and they're probably the two areas where most leakage is out of from a business, certainly from us. That's our biggest cost, and we all get managed on claims ratio, and then how are we managing our risks? So when we're seeing risks, emerging risks, how are we managing those? So they're probably the two areas that I think that will become the biggest areas of significance for insurers. I think it's interesting to see how that's working. Again, for our business and for what we do, it's still very much, and I mean, the challenge with, any industry, but particularly insurance, and the law, because often the law doesn't keep up with, and we see that with cyber, for example. We've got cyber policies and we've got coverage that, the law hasn't even caught up with yet. So even if you wanted to take someone to court, you've got something that was written 30 years ago that relates to something that's not relevant anymore. So I think, I'm not sure the answer to that, if that's answered your question, but I think those two areas of risk assessment and claims processing or claims assessment are probably the two areas where I see the most growth in technology. But for us in legal expenses, it's around the law catching up with the challenges that we have around what we are insuring. And I think cyber is seeing that at the moment. You know, we have cover where we talk about, you know, we have defamation and identity theft cover from a legal expense. You know, someone steals your identity because you've gone to the local RSL and put your license in. You know, everyone puts their license in. We don't think anything of it. We just put it in because that's the only way we get $5 beers and we can go to the trivia night. So we hand it across. We don't know where that goes, and yet it turns up, or someone's used it. We had I was reading something just recently where someone had his Amex cancelled because he had a poor credit rating. They realised that, and apparently there was a loan through some other financial institution that he'd taken out, which he'd never taken out. He'd never done anything with that, but they got hold of his ID, and so that's a challenge. So you've got there where there's great technology, you know, we go to a club and we put our license in and it's all great. We don't have to fill out the little form and the ticket anymore. It's all very, you know, it's all electronic and they capture the information. But the consequence of that is that data is now available for hackers and for sale, and, you know, it impacts your life. Yeah. So I think we have to be a bit careful around that.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's really interesting that you just triggered a thought, which was the circumstances in which, as obviously specific LEI falls into this specifically, which is what can be done and pursued or defended against is very changing and dynamic and evolving. And so how do you think about that on a product level in terms of wording and how the policy is structured to be able to change with that dynamism? Is that a challenge? Is that something that you have to continually update wordings, or is the wordings broad enough that can encapsulate lots of those changes?
Yeah, that's the exciting part that I do. That's the stuff that I love. You know, I my poor underwriting team, they just, when I have an idea or a thought, you know, and they usually come when I'm in the shower at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I text them and they're like, stop it. But yeah, it's exactly that. It's okay, so this is happening. Would our policy respond? Could we make our policy respond? This is something that people need to have access to justice to. What do we need to do to make it happen? So, you know, and that's the stuff that I just love doing. And I don't think insurance policies should be static. I think they should be ever evolving, because our society and what we do every day is evolving. And I think we saw probably about 10, 15 years ago, you know, we saw the emergence of, you know, the UEs and the, you know, the budget kind of car insurance. You know, if you only drive your car 6 kilometres a day, then why should you be paying the same amount that somebody that drives 200 kilometres a day? You know, the risk is lower. I mean, Stellar Insurance do a fantastic, you know, they're a women's only, well, not women's only, but a women's centric insurance product. And the data that is attributed to female drivers under 25 is male data. You know, it's not female data. So why wouldn't we have a policy that responds differently? And so we're doing the same thing. And we want, you know, each time we kind of come across a scenario or, you know, something, we get a call through our helpline and somebody asks, would our policy respond to this? And we think, no, not at the moment, but it should. And so how could we make that respond? And can we still help this customer in the meantime, or this insured in the meantime? But let's have a look and see how we could make that a little bit more broader. Yeah. Obviously, there's the standard exclusions that, you know, fraud, criminal activity, all of those things that we don't want. But yeah, I think, you know, in seriousness, there needs to be a lot more innovation and product development in the insurance industry. And without sounding, and I say this with all respect, I think the insurers, the big insurers in Australia, have got lazy around that. I think they haven't been innovative, and I think the underwriting agency space is really taking that forward. You know, we're seeing more and more underwriting agencies start up, and, you know, I think that puts the insurers on notice a little
Sure
bit.
Does. We actually had Sam White from Stella on the pod. She's wonderful, awesome. Absolutely fantastic. And you touched a little bit earlier in the conversation around domestic violence, and they were doing a bunch of work to get domestic violence into their policies. And so
we're working with them. We're partnering with them at the moment. Yeah. So that's a big part for us, is that we want to build a product that supports domestic violence survivors and victims, not only when there is that traditional DV space, but around financial coerciveness and how do we empower those women? So giving them choice, and men, it's not just women, but those individuals that if you can have it attached to your car insurance, if you can have it attached to your pet insurance, you know, it's just there for when you need it, because you don't know when you're going to need it. You know, no one goes into a relationship going, oh, I better take out some DV protection. You know, you go into it with love and open-heartedness and all of those things. But, you know, we all know that can turn sour very quickly. And so Sam and I are working very closely, as we are with the UK team, to build out a universal product. So we're really excited about that. So I might be touching base with you, Nigel, in a couple of months. We can.
Oh yeah, I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear that. Really, I thought at the time when Sam said it, I thought that, to your point around what we mentioned earlier around education and access and it being attached to a policy that sits like that, really resonated for me. And so, yeah, really looking forward to seeing that. And Natasha, I could speak to you for days and days, but I'd like to maybe finish on something that has been a theme throughout the conversation, I think, which has been this underinsurance within this space specifically. And looking broadly, what steps can the insurance industry take to mitigate these underinsurance gaps and really make legal expense insurance a mainstream product in Australia? That's a big question, but I'd love to understand your view.
I'll try and I think if you put it into three categories, and I think there was a paper, Disrupt by Design, or Design to Disrupt by Catherine Fitzpatrick, which was released last year, I think. And it's a fantastic paper. So if you
please do. We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. And she talks about three areas of insurance, three areas where I think, you know, that where the underinsurance and where we can be better at it. And the first one is insurers, you know, underwriting agencies, you know, individual insurers where, you know, they're building the products, they're working in that space. The insurance industry generally, you know, we need better education, we need better data sharing, we need a more universal approach to where there is underinsurance and how we can bring that level up, and so that, you know, I mean, ARAG talk about access to justice, but how do we get an access to insurance, you know, kind of mandate across the board that, you know, someone who, you know, ticks a box, they're online and they think, do I want flood cover? They tick a box. They don't know what flood cover means. I don't live near a creek, so why would I want flood cover? But it talks about other areas, you know, you could have, again, so getting into that and educating. And then government regulation. So getting a more universal and streamlined approach to definitions, you know, government bodies being a little bit less toothless, I think, and really starting to drive some of those gaps, and making or holding insurers and the regulator to account where we do see underinsurance and where we do see individuals or businesses being disadvantaged by some of these things. We're doing our bit with legal expenses. You know, we talk about cover the gaps. We talk about where other policies are defence only. We offer a pursuit angle. So if you're a business, yes, you take out all of these defensive covers, and that's great. You should have those. You know, you need to. That's a very important part. But why wouldn't you want to have the right to pursue your legal right? Why do you want only something that if someone wants to come after you, you can kind of put up the shield? Why wouldn't you want to say to somebody, actually, no, I'm not going to tolerate that and I'm not on for that, but I've got a policy that I can actually exercise my legal right. And I think that not only is empowering, but I think what it does is it changes our societal views around right and wrong. And that's another big, you know, I'm very passionate about, you know, people having the right to do that. And it shouldn't be a financial decision, Nigel. I think that really cripples people when you don't make good decisions in your life because of the cost. And I get that at some point you've got to say, look, I'm going to walk away from this. And, you know, our policy is not a never-ending checkbook. You know, we look at the the policy, we look at whether it responds, we look at, you know, whether the law would support you and whether there's reasonable prospects. All of those things come into account. But as a business owner, I would like to think that I have the right to pursue that, and other insurances. And I think that's a gap in underinsurance in Australia as well.
Natasha, thank you so much. And I please, when you and Sam come together and get these policies into the market, I would love to have you both back on a pod, and we'll have both of you on, and we'll
oh gosh, that's a lot of
I'm all up for it. Powerful women is what I'm about, so I would love that. So please, thank you so much for the conversation today. It's really wonderful to hear your really principled position, and how there really is a focus of all of the decisions you make, and how you're running the business. So best of luck. It's fantastic. We'll be cheering from the sidelines. Hopefully we get the chance to have another conversation. So Natasha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Nigel. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
So thanks everybody who's been listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I know I have. All of the links of the things that Natasha mentioned today, we'll put in the links in the description. If you want to jump and watch us and see our beautiful faces, you can jump onto the YouTube channel and jump and see the video there. And as always, if you want to hear more from industry leaders who are pushing the boundaries of insurance, please do jump in and check out other episodes of our series, Building Tomorrow's Insurer. Natasha, thank you, and make sure we'll speak to you soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Nigel. Have a good one.